Today, on this episode of Going Deeper, we are finishing our journey through the book of Joshua in chapters 23 and 24. We talk about God's faithfulness and our faithfulness in response. I'm your host, Kyle McCaskill.
I'm Marie Burns.
I'm Becky Clark.
And we'll get to chapter 23 in just a minute. So we are diving in this week to the very end of the book of Joshua.
Sorry, I you started out with like this, and it's totally on camera.
That's all right. I don't care. Jumping into the very end of the book of Joshua, chapters 23 and 24, I have a feeling that Becky's got some pretty interesting things to bring to us this morning. So I know in my pre-reading, this, we're a little bit off the beaten path today, but we're going to do this anyway. Chapter 23, 24.
Yep, chapter 23 and 24.
We're trying really hard not to laugh right now.
So many things.
Because I know if you're anything like me, you actually have no idea what we're about to talk about.
Nope. I mean, there's a few things. There's some interesting things that I read about chapter 23 and 24. I have to say, it's like I'm kind of sad we're done. We're at the end. This has been a really good book. And in some ways, I feel like chapter 23 and 24 are a little bit anticlimactic. And then in other ways, I feel like they're obviously exactly where we would want to be at this point. Mm-hmm. So the chapters are really Joshua's kind of last farewell words to the people of God. And one of the things that is presented, and it kind of makes sense, but I'm not exactly sure if it really matters, is that 23 and 24 are actually the same story from two different perspectives.
Okay.
I wondered about that.
You wondered about that?
I did.
Well, I got caught up in the fact that it seems like in chapter 23, I mean, he calls all the people, but he seems to kind of only be addressing a certain group of people, maybe, sorta. And then he gathers them again and says basically the same thing, except a little more expounded. Mm-hmm. And so when one of the commentators suggested that likely is just two different perspectives of the same story, that seemed to somewhat make some sense, because if the three of us were to sit down and tell the same story, we're all going to tell it from a different point of view, and think that each of us will think different details are important to share. So I don't know if it really changes anything too much, except the idea is that the recorder of Joshua, this author, wants to show the deep importance of these last words of Joshua to the point that he records it by two different perspectives and kind of gives you an even fuller view of this discourse that Joshua has with the people, and the things that he wants to leave them with, and the things that the Lord says, through him and everything. So, it kind of makes sense. There's some spots where I'm like, well, I'm not exactly sure if that could be really true, but it lends itself a little bit more. I don't know. Everybody read those two chapters and then decide for yourself, I guess, if you think that's the case.
The first chapter of the two seems to be very concerned with the obedience aspect, whereas the last chapter seems to be a lot more about how they got here, kind of a reminder of why, which, if they're making covenant, which they are, that these would be the things you talk about in chapter 24 at the beginning of a covenant, of the preamble of what all God has done for them.
Yeah.
So,
well, and then, the point that you just made kind kind of lends itself to thinking that maybe they're two separate speeches as well. You would address the leaders and the priests and all that kind of stuff in chapter 23 and really be talking about the obedience and the adherence to the law and all that kind of stuff, because they were the ones that needed to make sure that those things were enforced and taken care of and reminded to the common everyday folk. And then in chapter 24, Joshua gathers everybody together and does kind of the retelling of the story, and it's the official covenant renewal moment. So I don't know, you can kind of interpret it, I guess, however you want. Are they the same thing told twice?
Right.
Are they two separate times? Anyway. So the some of the other things, really, I spent more time and kind of was a little bit more fascinated with chapter 24 than chapter 23. I guess just because some of it had to do with the retelling of the story and the way that Joshua tells it. Did you guys notice in chapter 24 how the tense and the pronouns changed kind of back and forth?
I did not.
Y'all didn't pick up on that?
No.
So when he's telling the story, he talks about, he's telling it kind of for God's perspective, and he'll say things like, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau, and then I brought your fathers, so here we are, and you came, and then when they cried, he put darkness, and your eyes saw what I did in Egypt. Well, it wasn't their eyes.
Right.
Right.
It was their ancestors' eyes. He switches the tense kind of back and forth, and I think he does it intentionally because he's trying to mix. He's not confused.
Right.
The first time I read it, I was like, "Do you, Joshua? In your
Because
old
he's
age,
saying,
you got a
"Then
little bit of
I sent
confusion."
Moses and Aaron, and well, obviously Joshua did not send Moses
Right.
and Aaron.
But he changes the tense of kind of who he's talking about.
Yeah.
Is he talking about the people before, or is he talking about the people who are standing right in front of him? He mixes the story between the two, and I think the intent is that he does it because he wants to make sure that they realize it is still their story. Even though they weren't there for the Exodus, they weren't really even there for likely for the very beginnings of the time in the wilderness. They just have all these stories. They know the story, but they are a part of the story. So he moves his pronouns kind of back and forth and weaves, and it can be confusing. And I wrote down, like, does Joshua have a little bit of like he needed a little help, and he's forgot who he was talking to, like when older people are like, you're talking to your grandchild but you think it's your child, kind of thing.
Concerned Joshua has dementia.
The family system was a lot different then
It was.
than it is now, and so fathers could mean fathers, grandfathers, whatever. Yeah.
But I mean, they're getting ready to renew a covenant, so the story needs to become theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, they're actively or supposed to be taking ownership.
Right.
Yeah.
At this point.
And one of the things that is very clear between chapter 23 and 24 is that Joshua is going back in a lot of ways back to chapter 1 when he declared what God had really declared over him initially, if you don't cling to me, speak my words, live into my law, then you have no part of me. You will lose all of these things that have been promised to you. And he tells that to the people in his big speech right before they go in and have their renewal and all that kind of stuff. They take the land in the Jordan, all that kind of stuff. This is very front end. And so at the very back of this book, he's reminding them to be faithful, obedient people. You will... he tells the story, and in 23 there's a lot of this back and forth of like, be faithful. If you're not faithful, this is what's going to happen. Be faithful. If you don't, this is what's going to happen. Or he says in one of the parts in and I can't remember if it's chapter 23 or 24, basically says you need to pick.
Right.
something.
That's in 24.
Yeah.
24.
Yeah.
Choose this
Pick
day.
something to believe. Pick God or pick something
Yes,
else.
this is where we get the
It's
the
that
refrigerator
ultimatum
magnet.
moment, which
Yeah.
is like,
It's
don't give them another option.
Yeah. It's that the cliche verse that we try to
Refrigerator
prettify.
magnet.
Yeah.
Choose this as
refrigerator
for me in
magnet.
my house, we will serve the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, the commentators I read were very kind of glowing about Joshua in that statement because he has painted the picture of this faithfulness and the fact if you are not faithful, you will lose everything.
Yeah.
The promise will slip through your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, so choose wisely what
Yeah.
you're going to do. And as for me and my house, like we've already made a choice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We made a choice from the very beginning of when I was called way long ago to even scout the land. I made a choice to follow God and believe in his faithfulness and believe in his promises. So my family has chosen.
Yeah.
So what will you choose this day? Which seems kind of funny because they already chose. They're in
Right.
the land,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think Joshua knows that when he is gone, the temptation is still there. And
Right.
the choice is daily, minute by minute kind of choice. And so you have to make it all the time.
He definitely doesn't sound convinced that they're like
Right.
he's saying choose this day who you'll serve, and they're like we're going to serve God. And he's like no, really, you can't
Yeah.
do this on your own. Are you sure?
Yeah.
And he warns them, if
Mm-hmm.
you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster on you and make an end of you after he has been good to you. But the people said to Joshua, no, we will serve the Lord. So it's like Joshua's like, okay, but really,
Yeah.
who are you going to serve?
Okay, so one thing that I thought was very interesting in this little exchange here, I actually underlined it, said, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after he has done you good. And this is one of those character of God moments for me that we find where God did good for them before they did good for God.
Yes.
And I like that that statement is in there just because it's like Joshua saying, look, you haven't done anything yet.
Yeah.
You are going to have to keep doing this. God has already done good for you. And if you don't, return the favor, basically.
Right.
Respond out of, that loving obedience, then God's going to turn his back on
Right.
you.
Right. You don't just always have the blessing.
Right.
You can.
And this
use
was,
that.
this was old covenant kind of stuff where if the people are not obeying and not following God's law,
Yeah.
they're out of this picture of
Yeah.
what God is trying to paint for his people.
One of the commentators I read made a statement kind of in regard to what you're talking about and said, the truth is that when we choose to follow God, there are spots in our lives where there's huge blessing. That that's attributed to God. And so you're living in that beautiful, you're living in the beauty of the promised land and the rest. But there are also times where you are persecuted and things are not going well and financial problems or whatever else. That doesn't change the goodness of God.
Right.
It doesn't change the fact that we still need to choose him. The faith journey is difficult, but it's the ultimate of what we're trying to get to with God, which is eternity with him, right? And we want it to be easy. And Joshua knew, and this is why he said in chapter 24, when they're like, okay, no, we choose God. He's like, okay, so who are you going to choose? And they're like, oh, we choose God. And he's like, okay, stop for a minute. Take very seriously and think through the choice that you are declaring here, because this is not an easy road that you have ahead of you to follow God. You are still going to have temptation. There are still at this point, even though there's rest in the land, there's still all the ites around.
Yeah.
There's still land to be taken. And at some point, God is going to lead you into the place of taking the rest of the land. Now, God does the work, but you still have to be faithful, and you still have to, I mean, it's still one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
You have a responsibility to move and go. So take very seriously this idea of commitment and obedience. And I think Joshua makes them stop because he recognizes and he knows, just how we know, that sometimes we make a commitment and we don't take it very seriously. Or we make a commitment and we take it seriously, but then at some point something happens and we pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just hard. It's hard to have that commitment. It's hard to stay in the midst of that. And that is the challenge and the temptation. And so let your yes be yes, even when your yes is difficult, or let your no be no.
Yeah.
Choose God or choose something else, you know? But stop before you just jump into the, oh, no. We're going to follow God, and sit back and think, what does that really mean for you? And then respond again however you need to respond, to be faithful in the midst of that. But I mean, it's true God is good no matter what. His character does not change, but we think it does when things get rough. You know, we blame him like he's done something different. He's done something that's opposed to who he says he is, or all the blame goes upon him.
Right.
But really, largely the blame has to do with when we turn and walk away, and which is what happens when you turn to Judges. You know, it happens kind of quickly.
Yeah.
And but this is what Joshua is warning against here.
Kind of reminds me of the parable of the seeds that are thrown out on the different types of paths, and they shoot up really fast and they burn out when the sun comes out because their roots aren't deep. Different things like that.
Right.
It's like, you're saying, yes, I commit to this, but you don't really understand what you're saying yes to, and you don't, even though you think you mean it in the moment, because perhaps you're on this lovely mountaintop experience, which they were quite literally on a mountaintop there.
Yep.
You don't really know what you're saying yes to, and how great it is of Joshua to say, no, you need to understand what you're agreeing to.
Yeah.
And if we would stop all Christians at some point and say, understand.
Yeah.
This is not the promise of an easy life. In fact, God promises that things are going to be tough.
Yeah.
And if things aren't tough, we might not be fully living into the promise he has for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I was just interested in, because the word serve is used, serve. And so I went and looked up just that particular word, and it is, there's a lot of aspects of how that Hebrew word could have been used, and I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but there's nothing in it that is implying something is going to be easy.
Right.
Like every single English translation of what that word could mean implies some sort of labor or hard work, or it even has bondservant and enslavement.
Think about Paul and all of his letters.
Exactly. And so I don't know, but I think that maybe Joshua is telling them, you are going to now, commit your work, everything that you do, to God. Not just, we're going to serve God with our lips like we do. Yes, Jesus is a friend of mine, but then we go out, and the way we act in the grocery store or sitting down at a restaurant table, clearly Jesus is not a friend of mine if I'm going to treat the people around me the way I treat them. So yes, it is not easy. It is, in the very words that Joshua is using, he's saying, this is going to be work.
Yep.
And I don't think you can really understand the work that it's going to take.
And I think we need to make a distinction here that's kind of important, is that Joshua is not, he's not at this moment addressing kind of the new believer. You know, which is, I think, is there's an important distinction of like, there's a point where you step into faith as much as you understand faith. But there also becomes a point where you, as a mature believer, have spent enough time in relationship with God that it's not that you're called to something more, but you're called to something more. You've moved into deeper. And so Joshua is addressing a group of people who are mature God followers. They have spent their whole lives knowing about God. They have experienced these amazing miracles of God. They are entering into the promise that they had only heard about before. So he's saying to these mature believers, this is what you need to commit to. This is what God is asking of you. God will continue to be for you. God will continue to provide. And I was reading in Deuteronomy how God talks about before they take the land. He says, I will make it rain when it needs to rain. I will make the fruit grow when it needs to grow. I will take care of all of the needs that you have if you will be obedient when we take the land and do the things that I am asking of you. He will provide in abundance. And so the people who have experienced that, in the taking of the land and the moving to the taking of the land, the rest now of the land, and they're coming back to this covenant and worshiping God for the promise. And Joshua is saying to you as mature believers, do you recognize and do you fully understand what you are committed to? Please understand that, and then take it seriously and live into it, because if you do, God will do and continue to do amazing things in and through you. You will experience such miracles and whatever else. But we're not talking about give that little bit that you just understand as a new follower. I'm talking about the mature believer to step into this faith in a different way, in a deeper way. And if you would do that, all these other ites that are around us will experience God.
You know, it's the difference between, well, they had been nomadic people all this time, and we've touched on this in the past, versus being settled in the land. And you talk about being a new believer when everything's a mountaintop experience and all these wow, great moments. And then you have to come down off the mountain and go back to your regular life. And God is still there in the midst of the everyday, but the miracle is now not the parting of a sea, but in the simplicity of the rain coming. And it's not ripping down walls around a city. It's, you had a great crop season and the frost wasn't too bad. And we lose sight of God in those moments. And that's when we become complacent in our faith, and we begin to forget about God, not recognizing that He is in everything around us. And those things no longer seem like miracles anymore. It's just, this is life. And so for us today, it's, I wake up, I take my son to school, I go to work, I'm living through it in and every day. And some people think, well, when you work at a church, God's, it's kumbaya and there's always a guitar. And I mean, we talk about Jesus a whole lot more here than I did when I worked in the nursing home in Kentucky. But it's still easy to, even when you're in a church building, to lose sight of it. I mean, gosh, we come to church, for some of us, it's every Sunday you're there on whatever row, but it's still, you're there because it's what you do on Sundays. And it just gets so easy, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I get why Josh was like, pay attention here, because you're about to settle. It's about to become the mundane everyday. Can you see God in the midst of it? Because even when you can't, you still need to be obedient, or all those promises, they're gone.
Well, I mean, take that train of thought you're on there takes me back to the first year I went to the SALT conference, and one of the most powerful messages I ever heard was a guy saying how he had gotten so wrapped up in working for Jesus that he forgot how to work with Jesus. And of course, at that time, I'd only been working at Trinity a little over a year, and it was already kind of easy for me to see where I could let myself go and get to that place. And man, that reshaping of things or re-perspectiving, it's not even a word.
Go with it. Say it with authority.
That's right.
Think it's true.
People call me Leonard Sweet. But yeah, the mundane is where we live and breathe most of the time, because you're right, it can't be that mountaintop experience. And then I also want to step back to the thing that I underlined in chapter 23, because it all kind of fits in all of this stuff. And it's chapter 3, verses 14, well, just verse 14. It says, "Behold, this day I'm going the way of all the earth, and you know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one thing has failed of all the good things which the Lord your God spoke concerning you. All have come to pass for you. Not one word of them has failed." That's the New King James Version. And it's like that reminder that if you do, not just if you do, even if you don't, God's word, his promises are faithful. So you should take that covenant that you're agreeing to very seriously, because not just the good things, but even the things that when you turn away, God is faithful.
Yep.
All have come to pass. And not just these nice things that God said have come to pass when you behaved.
Right.
And he ignored the things that...
Yeah.
That's not what it says here.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Well, as we know of the story as it continues, what God warns them of here in Joshua does come to pass. I mean, God's word is true.
Yeah.
I mean, and so he says in chapter 23 in verse 13, know for certain that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you, if you marry with them and associate with them, but they shall be a snare and a trap for you, a whip on your sides and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from off this good ground that the Lord your God has given you. And one of the commentaries pointed out, it wasn't just the loss of land that eventually happens. It's all these, national kind of disasters as all the ites come in and fight with them through kings and all this kind of stuff. There's, and there are famines and all these other things because they're unfaithful. And eventually they completely lose the land. But those things come to pass. Yeah. Those warnings come true because the people of God broke covenant. And God laid it out quite clearly to them of what could happen. And I guess they just kind of said, no, God wouldn't do that. Or, I don't know, forgot, ignored, didn't believe that he...
But isn't that what we do a lot today too, though? Because, especially on this side of the new covenant with Jesus, is we ignore the holiness of God because we have Jesus. And it's funny because I was actually thinking about this yesterday or day before. So we don't take holiness seriously anymore because somehow we've gotten in our minds that God doesn't take holiness serious anymore. But if God didn't take holiness serious, then why would Jesus have had to come?
Yeah.
If it wasn't a big deal, then why did we even need Jesus?
Yeah.
That's often lost today, Kyle. We don't like to talk about holiness.
I know we don't, and this is like the internal dialogue in my head very often. I'm talking to myself here very often in all of this, not just, oh, how can I use the Bible to prove that what I'm thinking is right and what you're thinking is wrong? Because that's not at all what this is about. It's really about, God, you said, that you're a holy God, that we're to be a holy people, for you are holy. And I don't know, maybe I take it very seriously. Yeah. And it's good to be reminded often, every day.
Yeah. All that holiness shows up in the New Testament too. Never mind the part that Jesus is actually there. When you get to the letters that Paul wrote, and Peter especially, which Peter even calls back to Old Testament language when he says that you need to be holy as God is holy. He's pulling out of Leviticus. And if Peter knows anything, I mean, if anybody's going to know anything, Peter walked alongside Jesus all those years. It had to have been important to Jesus too. I agree with you. The holiness aspect of this gets lost in this day and age because Jesus is love. Jesus is love.
But as long as you're not hurting anybody else, whatever, it's okay, right?
And of course, we go back to poor Achan, so many chapters ago, who just took some devoted things and buried them in the ground, and lo and behold, not only did it get his whole family killed, but it changed the war. It changed the battles themselves. Your sin is never just your sin.
Yeah.
Oh, they lost people on the battlefield, and then they lost all of Achan's family, all of his livestock, and all that stuff because what he did, he didn't think hurt anybody else.
Right.
Sin hurts, and thinking only of yourself is. There's no levels of sin, but maybe the worst. Right. Because that's what sin is really surrounded by.
Yeah.
Sin is
selfishness.
Sin is the selfishness. Sin is thinking that you are and can be God, that you are better than God, that you know more than God, that you don't need God. That is the root of sin, is that you can be God, he does not have to be.
And what I'll say, I kind of feel like we're kind of coming to the end of our discussion here on Joshua. We are, because we're in the last chapter. But at the very beginning of this, I hadn't actually read the book of Joshua, and there's still pieces of it that I just kind of skimmed over. But I hadn't done real research on it before. And these conversations that we've had these past month and a half, two and a half months, I guess, it's been that long, have really helped me to understand and to really reinforce the idea, because the idea for me was always there, that there's this thread of Jesus that runs through all of it. That the more we see, and yes, some of it is boring with, the allotment of the land and everything, but in all of that, there's so much richness here that if we stop and just read, and if we're looking for God in the small little bits here, and not just trying to feed our own selfish desires of, because, sometimes we do end up bowing down at the altar of theology instead of actually worshiping God, then, I don't know, it is just, I feel like it has really brought me closer and deeper into that relationship, just in this one book here. And I mean, I can't say enough about how much I like the conversations we've had over the past few years as we've gone through, Leviticus and Hebrews and now Joshua. Just reading it.
The thing to pick up, I mean, this is the full intent of the author of Joshua, is the thread of the promises that God makes are promises that God will fulfill.
Yeah.
So for each one of us, in our own lives, what you feel like truthfully in your relationship with God is something that is promised to you, God will fulfill that promise. He is a faithful God.
Yeah.
And what he asks of us is to be faithful to him. If we do that, then God provides and he takes care. Not always in the way that we think or want, but it is in the best interest of each one of us. And sometimes that road is hard to get to, what is the best for us. And the people had to clear land and take lives to get to the fulfillment of the promise, which I can't imagine was the most fun thing to do. But God's promises are true. God holds to his promises. He is a God who upholds his end, and he asks us to uphold ours, even in the midst of knowing that we will struggle with it.
Yeah.
Even in the midst. Okay, before we are done, I just feel it is important that we address...
Please tell me you're bringing about 24:12.
Yes. Yes.
I was going to ask this.
I do feel it is important that we address the Hornets.
The murder hornets.
The Hornets. It does not say murder hornets in the scripture. We have added the word murder to the Hornets.
To change scripture.
But
nevertheless,
it is 2020. If you were listening to this past 2020, awesome. In 2020, there potentially were more murder hornets.
Yes.
I don't know what happened to them. They were hinted at, they were feared, and then they disappeared. They disappeared. But Joshua mentions hornets in chapter 24, verse 12, and it says, "And I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out before you, the two kings of the Amorites. It was not by your sword or by your bow." Please tell me what you think he is saying there.
Murder hornets.
God sent murder hornets. Duh.
What goes around comes around. There is nothing new under the sun.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Fear not the murder hornet. It's already been by.
That's right.
Long time ago.
Long time ago.
That's it. That's okay. Good.
Right.
So the murder hornets have come and gone, and they have come and gone again in 2020. Okay, really, the reason we're going to talk about it is because we can laugh about it, but it's funny because a lot of people don't know what to do with it, and so they just kind of skip over it and are just like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what the word means. I don't know what the reference means. It's a little vague, blah, blah, blah. There are a few commentators that try to address it, and they say it's just kind of like an analogy, or it means hornets really just means kind of like a driving out. It's a figurative expression. So potentially it's a figurative expression for the terror God strikes in the hearts of his enemies, the Canaanites. These hornets are just terror and panic, irrational, overzealous, completely crazy fear or panic.
That's right. I remember we had a conversation about this before.
Super long ago.
Yeah, and
we drew some interesting parallels.
We did. There's a linguistic similarity to the leprosy, to be stricken with leprosy. I remember we talked about that. We did. But it's different enough. Like, the two words don't really even look very much alike. The Hebrew words don't look very much alike.
I bring it up because at this moment we should just put our tinfoil hats on a little bit. Okay. And just have fun with scripture. And maybe this is like this is what you shouldn't do with scripture, but we're going to do it because it's just fun.
And now for how not to read scripture with Becky.
Oh, that's right. How not to read scripture, the things you should be forewarned not to do, but we're going to do it. This is how quickly these things can devolve when you're reading scripture with your own intent. Yeah. Although sometimes it's just funny. So we did have this conversation when we hadn't even done a first lesson on this. I was doing yes, I was doing kind of a cursory read through of the whole book, and we had been opened back up as a church for not too long, and all that kind of stuff, and our numbers were the COVID numbers were still really high in Louisiana, and all that kind of stuff, and so we were sitting in Doug's office. I had had this moment with a few people, and I said, the similarity in the Hebrew word of hornet is somewhat similar to leprosy, and leprosy is a skin disease that people were at the time early in. Leprosy was a huge deal, and it was contagious, and that people were ostracized for it. So if you had leprosy, you were isolated and made to feel dirty, and you had to declare yourself unclean when you came by.
We don't know what that's like at all in 2020.
That's right. Again, these are the things you should not do with scripture, but we're doing it anyway. So we did make an interesting parallel between leprosy and COVID, which is too big of a leap and really is inappropriate in some ways, but we were laughing about it. And we were talking about murder hornets, and that murder hornets had maybe come in 2020, but God talks about them in Joshua, and so there's nothing new under the sun. And what do we do? And that murder hornets mean irrational fear and panic. I am not saying that about COVID. There's truth. I'm just saying sometimes you can have fun with scripture. It makes it, you get to a point of kind of being lighthearted about some things. Right. And, but really, those are bad parallels. Those are all very bad parallels. It's not saying anything about scripture. Although I do believe that somewhere deep within me, I believe that there were murder hornets before there were murder hornets in 2020. Yeah. I'm not sure I completely agree with these people who just say it's a figurative thing. Yeah. God could send hornets whenever he wanted.
This is true.
Or not.
So
there may have been hornets before. Real hornets. Real murdering hornets.
Yeah.
I mean, hornet stings you. You swell.
Don't
it's
think not it comfortable.
Like leprosy, but
no. I mean, if he can sing frogs and gnats and things, he could send hornets that could hurt you.
Locusts. Yep.
And locust. That's right. So
if he wanted to send murder hornets, he could have.
There could have been murder hornets.
Yeah.
He promised to send the hornets back in Exodus in chapter 23. If you are like to cross-reference, you can go back to chapter 23.
Yep.
And Deuteronomy chapter 7, promising that when they go to take the land, he will send the murder hornet ahead of them. And of course, we know from reading Joshua that their hearts melted in fear. They were so afraid of what was coming their way. But
Exodus, Deuteronomy, and Joshua.
Yeah,
it's that same Hebrew word.
Really, I agree with the people who try to tackle the use of this figurative word of hornets. There's a deep driving out. There's a deep fear that God sets in the hearts of his enemies that he uses for the good of his people to prepare a way or anything like that. So really, that's ultimately what it means. Yeah. But
so next time I see a hornet, should I yell, "Prepare the way for the Lord," and go running?
He's driving something out. He's driving something out. Yes.
It is interesting the progression we see here, because in Exodus it is God saying, "I will send the hornets ahead of you," and then Deuteronomy, it is whoever wrote Deuteronomy says, "The Lord your God will send the hornets against them." And then in Joshua, then it's the Lord saying, "Then I sent the hornets before you." So it's God saying, "I'm going to do this." It's a messenger of God saying, "Hey, God said he's going to do this."
Yeah.
And then it's after it happens, it's God coming back and said, "See, I told you. I did it."
Yeah.
Yes. God keeping promises.
Right, yeah.
Murder hornets.
Murder hornets.
I mean, don't they come back in the end? Don't we see them one more time?
I feel like Doug, when we talked about it with
There's-
them, mentioned that there may be a place in Revelation where they are mentioned. So if you're listening to this, go do the work and find it for us, because we didn't do that part.
Yes.
We just got off
Enlighten
track.
us.
With,
Listener, enlighten us into.
we were just
where
off
they
track with
return.
making silly connections that were not really there, but we were just kind of on a roll at the time, and
It was fun.
it was fun and everything. But because sometimes you need to be lighthearted when there are serious things happening, and you just don't know what to do. But I do think there were murder hornets.
Yes.
And we could be figurative too, potentially in 2020, of the murder hornets, and think that God was driving something out or preparing the way for something that we don't know about yet. And maybe that's just to prepare for 2021. I don't know, or something that God's going to do
Well, here's
down the road.
Here's the thing. Regardless of murder hornets, no murder hornets, regardless of what 2020 still has in store for us in the last month of 2020, or what 2021 has in store for us, God is God. God will still be God. And who are we going to serve?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. That's really what it's all about, anyway.
And so that really kind of wraps up our episode for today, which in turn wraps up our opening season of this podcast adventure that we're on. We are going to take a couple of weeks off of posting. So if you're listening to this before the, or if you're listening to this as we're releasing them, then we will be back on December 1st. We will publish the first in a series of Advent podcasts. And we will also be talking about and leading us into E100, which, y'all, I cannot tell you. We're going to have some new voices come join us. We're going to have Doug. We're going to have Chris come join us for the podcast here and there. And we are going to jump into reading E100, the Essential 100, beginning in 2021, because we know one thing that 21 has in store for us, and that is E100. We're going to be reading as a group of people.
Being in the Word of God as a full church.
That's right.
Which E100 is the essential 100 scriptures of the Bible, 50 in the Old Testament, 50 in the New Testament, that tell the story of the people of God. And we as a full church are going to be reading that together. And we encourage anybody else to do it too, because you can easily join us from anywhere. And
so
be a part of
whether
it.
you're connected with Trinity in some way, shape, form, or fashion, or whether you are not, you just have discovered us organically, we invite you into this journey with us. So look forward to our short little Advent mini-series, I guess you could say, that we'll do in December. And then in 2021, we'll be on the track of E100. Thanks for listening. We'll see y'all in a couple of weeks.